Well, in the market today, there's a lot of folks that are looking to move out of the stock market and into land, and they're looking for opportunities to make money, and they're basically speculators. And today I'm on a new property that is a great opportunity, in my opinion, to split. And we're going to talk about speculating and splitting properties on today's episode of The American Landman. All right, well, let's jump into this topic. So when you're thinking about buying a piece of property, a raw piece of land, and splitting it, you're kind of stepping into a new realm of being a land investor, and that's being a speculator. You're speculating that you could improve on this property somehow, subdivide it, improve on it, do whatever, and make some money in the process. That's called speculation, and it can be a risky endeavor if you don't know what you're doing and you're not aware of the market. So over process and over time, I've developed a process that I think I've identified some key factors that at least minimize as much of the risk as possible. So here we go. And we've talked about some of these before. Number one is demographic and travel corridors and growth corridors. Demographic travel corridors are basically synonymous with growth corridors. They typically go together. And what I'm saying there is the areas that folks want to move, they want to exit a large metropolitan area and they want to develop their own piece of land out in the country. And so any county, any state, any city is going to have these growth corridors. And the Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minneapolis Metro, which influences our real estate here a lot, we're talking about Highway 94, Highway 35, 64. You come into Wisconsin, 35, 64 comes to Highway 87, and then it goes down the line to county roads and avenues, streets, and then even into country roads where it's graveled. Those growth corridors are growth corridors where people want to move and travel corridors where they want to drive. Anytime you can identify those and get a property on one of those areas and be 3 to 5 miles off of the major areas, and as you go down to county roads and lanes and streets and gravel, you can be closer and closer to those corridors and people will be interested in a property. As an example, most people don't want to be right on interstate just for the noise and the traffic and the pollution, but they're going to be attractive to maybe a country lane that you can hear the birds singing and there's fresh air and you get the idea. So pay attention to how close to these travel corridors and these growth corridors that you want to buy. If you get the right spot, which is typically 3 to 5 miles from the larger travel corridors of interstates and county roads, that's where most people want to be. You can get on the freeway, you can travel to amenities, you can get to grocery stores and a Starbucks or whatever you want to get to very quickly. Those are always going to be solid locations to be. But if you're targeting maybe a rural buyer, they're not going to want to be there. They're going to want to be out in the country. So you kind of got to know who you're going to sell to when you buy that piece of property. The next thing to identify on the property are the opportunities to subdivide. Those usually relate to road frontage. On this property, as you can see, I've got road frontage on two sides. It's a county road. It's somewhat well traveled, but it's fairly, it's really not that busy. The key to these county roads is there electric and is there internet? And I'm going to emphasize internet accessibility now because as people move out of the cities and these rural parcels are more attractive to them, they almost have to have internet access. The good thing is that in these rural areas, at least in my area in west central Wisconsin or northwest Wisconsin, there's been a grant and there are a couple companies that are bringing in fiber optic, fast, high-speed internet to these rural areas. It's really changed the game. It's allowed people to come out into the country and be able to work from home, which is what they want to do. The next thing to consider is how do you split these parcels? Well, a 40-acre like this is pretty easily split. As you can see, I could take the north side and I could take two 10-acre parcels, kind of long rectangles. Each of those rectangles would touch the road. Then I could take this side on the south side and I could have two square 10-acre parcels, and I could take the 40 and divide it up into 4 parcels. Now, if you do your math, it's kind of obvious, but you know, the way this makes sense is that you could almost double your money, and that's typically the goal that the investors look for. They want to double, if not 2.5 time increase in their investment, because after they get the permits and do any grading and any improvements, they want to have money left over. So target a property that you can at least double your money. And this is what could happen here. I could take these 10-acre parcels and I could sell them each for $75,000, which I've done my research, and you should do yours in your area. And I found that, you know, a 10-acre parcel that is developed and has all these internet and other amenities is going to sell for about $75,000. For sales, $300,000. The purchase price on this for this area, I've done my research, is about $3,500. So that's a little over, I don't know, $130,000, let's call it. You take the property, you subdivide it up, and you sell them, and you make your money. You know, another thing that I've identified is anytime I have a situation like this where I've got the road frontage, and I got probably about a 5-acre little spot here where somebody could come up and they could build their homestead here on this flat spot. We've got an access point here, we got the road, we got electric and all utilities, but we got sightline breakup. This little area right here is kind of a corner of the property that they don't have to look at their neighbors that might buy the other parcels behind them. There's sightline breakups with the rows of trees. That's always attractive. So if somebody will come in here and they'll say, all right, I'm interested in buying this property here for $130,000. I have my lot with my land. I'm going to have my homes and my buildings here. And I got plenty of room to maybe build a little hobby farm or a beautiful home. But then I could sell off the back parcels at, you know, $75,000 a piece. I can sell those off and pay for this. That's the whole idea. It's sectioned off, it's private, and it has an access because there's an agricultural drive right behind me. So those types of features, just a little bit of visibility breakup instead of one flat piece, some tree lines are always good when you're looking for properties that you might subdivide. You also got to consider, what does it take to prep those properties in order to sell them? So let's talk about that. So I've done this on a couple properties with some of my clients, and this was the process. First off, we identified, is this a good subdividable property? And in some cases, it might already be subdivided for you, meaning the county or an appraiser or a surveyor has subdivided with different property identification numbers out throughout that property that make up that 40 acres. In this case here, we only have one. So we're gonna have to do that. So we're gonna call a surveyor, and he's gonna come out and we're gonna say, okay, I want 10 acres here, 10 acres here. I want you to mark these corners, and I wanna create 10-acre lots, 4 of them. So he'll come out and he'll do that. There may be some engineering requirements as well, in the form of knowing where driveways can be. So you're going to want to call your township and or your county, and an engineer will look at it. And they usually are looking at these driveways with the mind of sight lines. And in my area, on a recent split that we did, it was a 400-foot sight line because there was a little bit of a crest of a hill. You had to have 400-foot sight line for that driveway. In this case, we found out it was doable and it didn't take a lot of permitting, but you always want to check on that because there may be requirements, and it's going to be different for every single county, every single township. Some of them are, yeah, go ahead, put a driveway in there, not a problem, but you will need a 15-inch culvert or a 10-inch culvert and a little bit of gravel and a permit or no permit at all. It really varies. You just got to find out. So once you've divided this property up, you're going to have the survey costs, the engineering costs. You might have some gravel costs to bring in the driveway and the work to put in a culvert. There's going to be some costs associated with that. But some properties, it's minimal, and it also depends on the market. Now, on a recent split that I did, we said we will do the survey, but only with the sale, and it's negotiable. Sometimes the seller pays for all the survey, and sometimes it's negotiable. They'll pay for none of the survey, or maybe they meet you in the middle, and it's a negotiation for each of the parties, because maybe the party doesn't want 10 acres, maybe they want 15 acres. So the seller may not, or you may not want us to actually survey that lot until you know what you're actually selling. People will maybe want to buy more or less. You just handle that in your listing and you say, seller will subdivide, or seller will subdivide with accepted offer, or some type of language around that. It kind of like leaves you options. So if you're going to sell a property, maybe you don't want to pay up front for the survey, is my point. Maybe you want to wait. And then what you do when you list that property is you simply put lines on the property with some mapping tools that I use that generally represent what you think you're going to be selling. So the costs that go into a property to subdivide it are really important. The next is determining the price of these properties. That's simply a matter of knowing your market. And of course, as a real estate agent, I use the MLS, but I use other tools like Acre Value Pro, MapRight, and then just my local knowledge of the area. I know what the properties sell for, and I know I believe I know what I think I can get for that property. And there's a lot of influences on that we've talked about, as well as the market. The market really dictates what you're going to get for the property. Right now, we're in the highest turnover, the best property sales market that I've seen in a long time. There's a lot of folks looking. There's a lot of folks wanting to get out of the cities. It's a great time to find these properties and subdivide them, but you got to go into it with a plan. So I hope that kind of sheds some light on the process and the opportunities that exist on parcels like this. If you're interested in speculating on splitting land, this is my recommendation. Call a land specialist with Whitetail Properties Real Estate in your area and talk to him about the market and have him evaluate a property like I'm doing today to decide, is this an opportunity? Then have a plan. Demographic travel corridors, growth corridors, amenities, internet, electric, gas, water, all those things that you might have to improve a property, and then surveying and engineering costs for driveways. Those are the basics of splitting a property that you have to look into. I hope that's helped you out. If you want to get into this, then give me a call. There's lots of ways to skin this cat. I am just touching the tip of the iceberg here. So give me a call. We'll talk about it. I hope you found this interesting. And as always, I appreciate you watching. Hey, I'm Neil Hauger. I'm a land specialist with Whitetail Properties Real Estate, and you've been watching The American Landman.